Welcome to CIA Declassified. We have explored the limits of the human mind, its breaking points, its vulnerability to drugs, its susceptibility to physical conditioning. Today, we leap past all of that and investigate the realm of science fiction. What if the CIA sought to bypass the ears, the eyes, and the skin and speak directly to the brain? This is Project Telepathic Strike, and this is the story of MK Ultra Subproject 102. Initiated in the late 1960s, this program had the most ambitious goal in the entire MK Ultra portfolio: remote psychological manipulation via electromagnetic frequencies. The objective was to implant specific thoughts, commands, or emotional states, like extreme paranoia or instant compliance, from a distance. To achieve remote influence, the researchers needed a frequency that could penetrate walls, buildings, and the skull itself with minimal energy loss. They settled on extremely low frequency, ELF, waves. These waves occupy the 3 Hz to 30 Hz range, the same bandwidth where key human brain waves, delta and theta states, operate. The key property of ELF waves is their incredible reach and penetration, typically used for communicating with deep-sea submarines. The scientists theorized that by mimicking the brain's own frequency, they could effectively inject information. The theoretical challenge, however, was not the transmission, but achieving a perfect lock on the target's brain activity. The foundational theoretical memorandum, CIA MKUL 102 MEMC2, established the project's entire philosophical framework. Document quote, "If the human brain is an organic transceiver operating on a known electrical signature, then the introduction of a coherent modulated ELF signal should allow for direct acoustic or emotional synthesis within the target's cognitive space. The effect must be non-thermal and psychologically destabilizing," end quote. To aid this lock, researchers experimented with the Schumann Resonance, the Earth's natural magnetic pulse, which hovers around 7.83 Hz. This frequency is already known to have a subtle synchronizing effect on human brain waves. Project Telepathic Strike attempted to use the Earth's resonance as a carrier wave, adding their own modulated signal to it, hoping to trick the brain into acceptance. The challenge was immense: how to modulate that low frequency with complex data like a spoken word or specific memory. The urgency of Subproject 102 was heavily fueled by the persistent intelligence reports regarding Soviet psychological warfare capabilities. Beginning in the late 1960s, a massive repetitive signal, nicknamed the Russian woodpecker, began broadcasting across the shortwave radio spectrum globally. While officially an over-the-horizon radar, the CIA feared its rhythmic low-frequency component was a cover for a vast low-level brain entrainment experiment targeting Western populations. The document CIA OPS Intel 71A explicitly links the fear of the woodpecker to increased funding for Subproject 102. Document quote, "The Russian use of high-power, low-frequency atmospheric disturbance must be matched. Our own ELF research must be accelerated to counter the proven or theoretical cognitive attrition effects of the Soviet systems," end quotes. The CIA wasn't just trying to achieve telepathy, they were trying to match a perceived Soviet advantage in mass passive psychological warfare. To generate and focus these massive low-frequency waves, the CIA commissioned the construction of the Focused Energy Transmitter, FET. This was not a small device. CIA MKUL 102 EQUIP 04 describes it as a multi-acre antenna array positioned in a remote, high-altitude desert environment. All geographical data is redacted. The complexity of the FET lay in its ability to be directional. It required massive coils, gigantic copper coils, to generate the vast magnetic field necessary for the ELF transmission. Insulation and power, specialized oil-filled transformers, and enormous capacitor banks to handle the 1.2 megawatt sustained power requirement, ensuring the signal remained stable during transmission. Geophysical requirements. The chosen testing site had to have extremely low seismic activity and be geophysically isolated to prevent interference from other natural or man-made electromagnetic noise. The entire system was designed to concentrate the massive electromagnetic energy and shape it into a tight beam-like field capable of maintaining signal integrity over a range of up to 10 miles. Generating an ELF wave is one thing. Getting it to carry complex information, like the word jump, is another. This was the modulation challenge. Researchers experimented with two primary methods for encoding data onto the low-frequency carrier wave. Amplitude modulation, AM, varying the power or strength of the wave to mimic the rise and fall of a human voice. This proved highly ineffective, resulting in only vague rhythmic pulsing in the subject's mind. And 2, frequency modulation, FM, altering the precise frequency within the 3 Hz to 30 Hz range to represent data. This was more successful for emotional states, e.g. 5 Hz for anxiety, 10 Hz for calm, but failed to transmit complex syntax. The operational conclusion was that while remote emotional influence was possible, remote verbal command was scientifically beyond their grasp with the technology available. How did they know if the target's brain was successfully locked onto the ELF signal? The entire project relied on intensive real-time EEG monitoring. Subjects were wired with dozens of electrodes to record their brain activity before, during, and after exposure. The researchers sought a phenomenon called frequency following response. Visual evidence on the EEG printouts that the subject's brainwaves were synchronizing precisely with the FET's transmitted frequency. The document CIA MKUL 102 RPT 12A outlines the success criteria. Document quote, successful entrainment is confirmed when the subject's average 4 to 8 Hz theta activity shows greater than 90% coherence with the external ELF signal, indicating neurological acceptance of the signal source, end quote. The high-power FET could indeed force the brain to lock on, but as we discussed, the content being locked was often chaotic, leading to the subject believing they were rapidly losing their mind. Project Telepathic Strike was plagued by catastrophic failures, primarily due to unpredictable interaction of the ELF waves with the complex human brain. The incident report CIA MKUL 102 INC F3 documents the horrifying consequences of high-power exposure. Induced epilepsy. Several subjects exposed to high-power chaotic ELF modulation suffered acute drug-resistant seizures. Involuntary motor response, the twitching. The electromagnetic energy, especially signals in the 8 Hz alpha range, was observed to induce involuntary muscle spasms and full-body tremors in 40% of subjects, suggesting the signal was also impacting the motor cortex. Sensory crossover, synesthesia. Subjects reported seeing colors linked to the frequency they were hearing, a form of induced synesthesia. This sensory confusion accelerated psychological fragmentation. Psychological fragmentation. Subjects often reported hearing voices for days or weeks after the FET was shut down, indicating the project had created permanent lasting psychosis. The internal medical notes determined that recovery was deemed uneconomical for these patients. The redactions in MK Ultra subproject 102 files are less about chemical formulas and more about who paid for and built the science. The most heavily censored section is the financial and personal audit, CIA MKUL 102 FIND1. Redaction hypothesis 1, corporate and military complicity, insulation. The CIA did not have the internal capacity to build the massive FET system. The redactions conceal the names of major corporate defense contractors and specialized military research divisions like naval intelligence that provided the technology, engineering, and remote secure testing sites. This secrecy protects the entire U.S. military-industrial complex from being tied to the telepathy experiments. Redaction hypothesis 2, Intellectual property and patents. The file likely contains details of patents or intellectual property developed during the project, particularly regarding ELF transmission and modulation. Revealing these patents could tie current non-classified government or corporate technologies, e.g. communications equipment, back to the unethical human experimentation of MKUltra. The CIA is protecting a long-term chain of scientific deniability. Was the CIA successful in Project Telepathic Strike? The final analysis is nuanced. No, they did not create weaponized telepathy, but yes, they achieved remote manipulation. The primary objective of planting a specific verbal command was deemed an 80% failure due to the chaos and psychosis it induced. However, the project was successful for achieving remote, targeted induction of non-specific, overwhelming emotional states. They proved they can use ELF waves to make a subject paranoid, irrationally fearful, or severely anxious from a distance without deploying a single asset or chemical agent. This capability was quietly repurposed. The massive FET technology was deemed too cumbersome, but the science of ELF brain entrainment was scaled down and integrated into advanced surveillance and counterintelligence systems, not for mind control, but for psychological attrition, low-level continuous electromagnetic exposure designed to induce chronic fatigue, insomnia, and anxiety in targets under long-term surveillance, rendering them psychologically vulnerable to traditional pressure. The thought bomb failed, but the anxiety ray succeeded in achieving low-level continuous psychological warfare. We have exposed how the CIA tried to bypass every human sense and speak directly to the brain. I'll see you in the archives. Remember to like this project and subscribe to the feed for surprises. We've explored the electromagnetic attack. Next, we go back to the darkest corner of the mind, the conditioning of total childhood regression. We open the file on Project Regression Wall, codenamed Subproject 111. This project was a focused effort to use extreme sensory deprivation and chemical compounds to force adult subjects into a permanent childlike state of dependency and suggestibility. We examined the horrific CIA MKUL 111 HOS RPT 01 document detailing the psychological devastation caused by chemically induced regression, designed to eliminate the subject's adult personality entirely. Was the agency trying to build agents that were literally born yesterday? In the meantime, keep an eye on the shadows and mind your step. I'll see you in the archives.